Hello Internet, I just got back from the movie, and given that I'm kind of struggling to balance my views of the film, I've decided to turn this review into a discussion between Romney the film critic and Romney the nerd fighter, because really, how often do I get to wear this shirt? So, expectations. I was kind of worried when they announced that Shailene Woodley was going to be playing Hazel. I mean, I haven't seen Divergent, I haven't seen many films she's been in, I've only seen her in The Spectacular Now, but even then, as an actress, I don't know, I'm just not that big of a fan. Some people put it best when they said that she's kind of at the stage where she can act, but she doesn't really kind of be the character, if that makes sense, and, well, at the very least, the role of Hazel's kind of playing to her strengths as an actress. Although I was definitely worried because Hazel had a bit of a sarcastic edge to her, and I was kind of worried about how Shailene was going to be approaching that. In my case, I was more worried about Ansel Elgort. I mean, I had no idea who he was, and the trailers didn't exactly make him look good. I mean, when you're hearing some of the dialogue from the book, it's kind of one of those things that sounded good in your head, or in your ear since I listened to the audiobook, but then when you hear it spoken out loud by an actual human, and who's actually trying to act it out and be taken seriously, it was a little bit jarring. Thankfully, that wasn't a real problem when I went to see the film proper. Well, looking at it as a film, it's a decently paced drama that has that nice edge of awkward realism thrown in. I mean, the strongest case would be Isaac's, well, mental breakdown after being dumped by Monica. However, the film does drag a little bit because it is trying to cover a lot of ground. They trimmed where they could. And another thing is that it kind of has an indie feel to it. Some people may find it charming, others may find it to be a tad pretentious. I mean, to use an example, there's the scenes where Gus and Hazel are texting each other and they're using the hand-drawn text balloons. And at first it was kind of cute, but you can only put up with that for so long before it starts to come across as desperate. To be fair, the indie feel is just more an effort on part of the filmmakers to not only make a good film, but to also make a film that still feels like a John Green story. And they really got that down pat with terms of the way the story and the character development was paced. And as for the hand-drawn text bubbles, admit it at least looks better than some of the other depictions of texting we've seen in other films in recent history. On a related note, there were some discrepancies between the film and the novel that I didn't particularly care for, but some of the stuff they did add I actually did like. So I'm guessing the scene that you liked was the egg throwing scene, and I thought it was pretty funny and also pretty cathartic, although I do feel that the 4 eyes, 5 legs, 2.5 lungs line felt a little forced, felt a little tacked on. It's not that Ansel Elgort gave it as a very forced line, but just definitely a case of, Yeah, but that at least works with Gus's character. That sounds like something he would actually say in addition to some of his other quirks. And it's also nice to actually give some focus on Isaac, because he kind of got a little bit shafted in the novel. I mean, yeah, there was the scene where Hazel caught up with him, and he was playing basically a voice-controlled, text-based adventure. That's the best way to describe it. So there was a little bit of a follow-up, but this was definitely just a much better follow-up scene for Isaac than what he got in the original novel. As for things that we didn't like, I did get kind of annoyed with some of the montage stuff, especially at the very beginning of the film where they effectively make you think that you're just watching the trailer all over again. Yeah, that was something that bothered me too, especially the scene where Hazel had to go to the hospital prior to the trip to Amsterdam. I mean, the dramatic music, the narration, it all felt kind of cliche compared to some of the more raw depictions of illness that we've seen in recent history. Now, to that statement, I have to ask, is it because it's an actual flaw with the film? Or is it because it clashes with what you had in your head when you were listening to the audiobook? I concede that's part of it, but it also kind of goes into a bit of an underlying issue of how they pretty much presented a more tenderized interpretation of the book. I mean, the book had some pretty raw moments, and on top of that, there were also some subtle elements that just didn't make it into the film. I mean, most notably, the reason Van Houten wrote An Imperial Infliction, as well as a few... You see, that's more of an effect of the chronological limitations of the medium. And really, a book can be as long as you need it to be in order to tell your story, whereas a film, on average, is going to be about 2 hours long. And so, changes are going to be made, things are going to get cut so that they can focus on the core of the story, which I think they did a really good job. That's a fair point, but I felt that some of those aspects really helped to address the underlying theme of the omnipresence of death and just kind of what we leave behind when we die. True, but I think they really got to that with Gus's overall arc throughout the film, and the second scene where they were at the Funky Bones really drove the point home. Yeah, I guess that's true. Overall, I think this film is pretty much well-suited to those who like character dramas and real-world stories, especially the moderately sappy ones. I'm hesitant to call it a chick flick, because there's quite a few things that men can relate to as well. This isn't necessarily the next Dirty Dancing per se, but it's got enough teeth on it that it'll probably be a sizable industry contender if the industry trades right. From my perspective, this is an overall faithful interpretation of the book. They managed to successfully translate John's overall storytelling style to film. And so I would even recommend this to some of the more cynical, some of the more, like, adverse readers of the book who are thinking, oh, the book, that's never going to be as good as the book. I'd even recommend it to them because even they would get some enjoyment out of it. Basically, people who've read the book or listened to it in my case would definitely get a lot out of this film. Also, fingers crossed that Will Grayson gets adapted next. I mean, heck, if I had the money, I'd pay for the rights to adapt into a web series, or maybe even whoa, cool your jets, Nerdfighter Romney. You're starting to slip into ambitious film student Romney for a second there. Well, and I guess since we're at the end of the review, well, we don't really need to go through this, so you can go ahead and go back to Romney Prime now. Just go. Okay. But I'll be back with the next adaptation based on something you actually read, whether it's Vampire Hunter D or Neil Gaiman's Journey to the West. Okay, with all of that, I give The Fault in Our Stars a 4.5 out of 5. So that brings us to the end of this episode of Romney's Reviews. It's kind of all up in the air what I'm looking at next week, and in the event that I'm not actually able to go to any screenings or have any money to see certain films in theaters, I do have some backup plans, so don't you worry. There will still be an episode next week. It just depends on how the week plays out. But all I can tell you now is that I'll see you next time.